The past year has unfolded like the opening of a gripping political thriller. But this isn't fiction. Across West Africa, deep societal frustrations and long-standing grievances about foreign influence, sovereignty, and independence have erupted into real, tangible change. It began in Burkina Faso, where whispers of discontent detonated into a bold assassination attempt on Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the young military leader who had already survived a previous coup plot. Instead of retreating or tightening his grip on power, Traoré did the unexpected. He doubled down on revolutionary change, launching one of Africa's most radical military transformations in modern memory. His goal: to end years of dependence on foreign-made weapons and to build a homegrown arms industry rooted in national pride and necessity. For Burkina Faso, this wasn't just a survival strategy, it was a declaration. A line was drawn. The nation would no longer fight for sovereignty using tools supplied by those it sought independence from. In neighboring Niger, the winds of rebellion swept hard and fast. A civilian administration perceived as overly sympathetic to French interests was overthrown in a swift and coordinated coup. What might once have been dismissed as another military power play was instead celebrated in the streets. Citizens rallied under national flags, not just in anger toward their former leaders, but also in open protest against France, demanding an end to what was widely viewed as a neo-colonial relationship. French troops, long seen as regional peacekeepers, were suddenly painted as occupiers. Their orders to exit came not in hushed diplomatic memos but in the fervent chants of crowds. The old security arrangements were unraveling before the world's eyes. Mali, too, witnessed its own seismic upheaval. Colonel Assimi Goïta, now the face of the nation's military leadership, accused French forces of betrayal, suggesting they weren't just failing to combat terror groups, but may have been enabling the very instability they were supposed to be eradicating. This accusation rocked diplomatic rooms in Europe, but on the streets of Bamako, it resonated with the raw truth. Many citizens had long questioned how foreign troops could maintain such a strong presence while violence and insecurity worsened year after year. Goïta's message was blunt. Mali would no longer outsource its defense to those it no longer trusted. It was a sentiment that felt less like a political statement and more like the release of long-held frustration. These aren't isolated episodes. They're interconnected strands of an emerging pattern, a wave not just of military takeovers, but of a shared ideology. Africa must reclaim control of its own destiny. For decades, the traditional geopolitical playbook in Africa involved a tightly maintained balance of foreign backing, civilian administration supported by Western powers in exchange for political loyalty and economic access. But this strategy is now unraveling. In its place are military regimes determined not to be client states, regimes that are unafraid to face isolation, economic penalties, or international scorn if that means true sovereignty. Fueling this movement are powerful ideological voices. Pan-African activists like Kemi Seba and Natalie Yam have taken to digital platforms and community networks to reframe the narrative. In their telling, these military takeovers aren't anti-democratic anomalies. They're correctives to decades of foreign manipulation. They speak directly to a young, energized population angry over exploitative trade deals, corrupt leadership, and resource wealth that has benefited outsiders more than citizens. In Burkina Faso, Traoré's push is about more than military pride. It's about building lasting capacity. Defense funds once spent on importing rifles and armored vehicles are now being directed toward local production. Ammunition factories, drone prototypes, and technical training centers are emerging, not overnight but fast enough to show real momentum. The ambition is clear: to become not just militarily self-sufficient, but to transform into a regional hub of affordable military engineering. That economic shift is causing a ripple effect. Instead of long-term aid packages linked to external interests, national resources are being reinvested in local industry, vocational education, and defense technology. This new military economy blend has critics, especially outside Burkina Faso. Some say it risks militarizing local society or diverting attention from civilian development. But domestically, it's viewed as liberation. When soldiers carry weapons built at home, by people who share their language, their culture, their purpose, it sends a message. Security is now in African hands. In stark contrast with past regimes that relied on Western weapons and diplomatic nods for survival, Traoré's model is independent by design. Of course, challenges remain: insurgencies, a limited engineering base, and raw material constraints. Yet the symbolism of what's happening is profound. For once, a nation is trying to stand on its own terms, without written permission from Paris, Washington, or Brussels. This pursuit of sovereignty ties directly into a broader ideological shift. Burkina Faso is no longer content with the question of whether foreign troops should stay. It is answering the bigger question: what does real independence look like? For them, it means breaking the cycle of dependency not through slogans but through industry, policy, and rebuilding from within. Other regional powers are watching closely. Traoré's model has spurred serious dialogue in neighboring countries about building local defense systems, reducing foreign debt impact, and pursuing equal partnerships rather than strategic dependency. Burkina Faso is already adjusting its foreign procurement policies, favoring deals based on knowledge transfer rather than heavy aid conditions. What we're witnessing could become a blueprint, not just military sovereignty, but a reframing of African strength. Can it weather sabotage, lack of resources, and diplomatic resistance? Time will tell, but the fact that it's even being attempted seriously changes everything. Elsewhere, the stories follow a similar arc. In Niger, decades of resource exploitation, especially uranium, essential to France's energy sector, became a symbol of the deep imbalance between wealth extracted and poverty sustained. Whole villages sat in darkness while their soil powered European cities. This symbolic injustice lit the fuse. Citizens no longer saw French involvement as protective but parasitic. The expulsion of French troops was not just a rejection of military aid, but of an entire system that seemed to reward silence and compliance. In Mali as well, accusations against France grew sharper. Many felt foreign militaries had overstayed their welcome while failing to achieve their mission. Mali's pivot was swift and unapologetic. Western defense agreements were cut. In their place, partnerships with regional allies and new global players who offered military cooperation without lectures or conditions. China's construction firms gained traction. Russian advisors arrived. Even Turkey stepped in. This realignment wasn't about switching sympathies, it was about finding breathing room from an overbearing status quo. For the first time in decades, citizens began to believe that freedom could be more than symbolic. France, caught off guard, has found its once reliable influence slipping. Its long-standing base agreements, currency ties, and soft power tools are now viewed with suspicion. The eruptions in Niger and Mali are shaking the very foundations of France's post-colonial strategy. Meanwhile, what's emerging is a Pan-African ideology that's no longer academic or diplomatic. It's active online and on the streets. Activists like Kemi Seba and Natalie Yam aren't simply amplifying discontent, they're giving it structure. They speak bluntly against the CFA franc, a currency bound to French control. They call out political systems designed to mask dependence with democratic veneer. They encourage partnerships beyond old allies, even with countries like Russia and China, who are often framed as controversial but seen by many as less manipulative. Western media often labels them as foreign agents or propaganda tools, but that misses the point. They don't speak for Moscow or Beijing, they amplify a grounded African criticism of Western patterns that never truly honored sovereignty. Their message is powerful because it's simple. True independence means deciding who your allies are, who funds your security, and how you use your own resources. These movements add moral force to military regimes that might otherwise be rejected as undemocratic. Normally, coups erode legitimacy, but in the current climate, many see military takeovers as reclaiming authority from compromised civilian elites. This emotional rebranding from coup to correction is supported daily through social media, cultural campaigns, and community action. It's no longer enough to say, Africa should stand up. Now, activists are showing what that looks like, and military leaders are aligning their actions with those ideas. What's driving this wave of change isn't a single shadowy mastermind hiding in some foreign embassy. It's not a rerun of Cold War strategies. What's happening is organic, a convergence of frustration, ideology, and bold action. Military rulers aren't working off a unified plan. They are responding to the same societal pressure at the same time. They represent a population tired of unmet promises, of seeing their natural riches flow out while foreign troops flow in. This decentralization, this lack of a single puppeteer, is exactly why the situation is so hard to contain. Sanctions don't break the movement. Condemnations fall flat. Because at its center, the true driver is African agency. If there is any mastermind at play today, it is the African people, informed, politically awakened, and no longer willing to beg for independence. Where this all leads remains uncertain. Military governance has dangers. History has shown us how easily these moments can descend into dictatorship. But in 2025, something is undeniably different. The silence is gone, a new chapter is being written by African hands. The question now isn't whether Africa is taking control. It's whether the world is ready for what happens when it does.